संडे की तरह आपके साथ जुड़ चुका हूँ। और जैसे मैंने आपको बताया था कि हर संडे हम लोग किसी न किसी एक्सपर्ट को बुलाएंगे आपके साथ बात करने के लिए। और जो आपके दिल में सवाल है उन सवालों का जवाब हम ढूंढते रहेंगे। अ, मैंने और श्री धनंजय जी गोखले ने एक बीडीडीआर के ऊपर हमने एक बात करी थी। एक छोटा 30-40 मिनट का वीडियो हमने अपलोड किया था। उसको बहुत पॉजिटिव रिस्पांस आया, बहुत लोगों ने सवाल भी पूछे। हमारी जितनी पहुंच है वहां तक हमने उनका जवाब दे दिया है। फिर भी अगर उसके बारे में कुछ सवाल है तो आप हमें पूछ सकते हैं। आज धनंजय जी को हमने बुलाया है दो चीजों के बारे में। वो चीज ऐसी है कि आप जानते ही हैं कि रिसेंटली अभी एक बड़ी दुर्घटना हुई है। वो जो दुर्घटना है पूरे हमारे सेक्टर को उसकी क्रेडिबिलिटी क्राइसिस पे ले जाती है। तो हमने सोचा क्यों ना हम लोग हमारे बैंक के ऑडिट के बारे में थोड़ी बात करें। अभी ऑडिट के बारे में तो कम से कम 3-4 सेशन हो सकते हैं पुराने। अगर आप हमारे वीडियो देखेंगे तो उसमें आपको ऑडिट के सेशंस भी मिलेंगे। लेकिन हम सिर्फ थोड़ा टचअप करने वाले हैं कुछ चीजों के ऊपर जो आपको ये मार्च के पहले फोकस करना है, कंसंट्रेट करना है। हमारा जो ये होगा, फोकस ऑफ डिस्कशन जो होगा, वो ऑडिट, स्पेशली इंटरनल ऑडिट एंड concurrent audit and statutory audit, how they all converge and how the urban cooperative bank should pay attention to all these three audits, especially how the board should pay attention. आप तो जानते ही हैं कि 122 करोड़ का कैश गायब हो गया, तो ऐसी कोई दुर्घटना नहीं हो इसके लिए हम लोग एक सीरीज ऑफ वीडियोस लाने वाले हैं। इसमें उसमें से ये आज का पहला वीडियो है। दिस इज a precursor to various concepts and ideas which the urban cooperative banks should not indulge into based on the experiences that are being seen or felt. Nobody has read those experiences on the backdrop of the event happening in New India Cooperative Bank. We will not be able to talk much about the New India Cooperative Bank because we do not know anything other than what you know or whatever that is in the public domain or whatever the news channels are talking about. We have to wait till really what happens or what has happened till it comes out. You all know that whatever that has happened in PMC 5 years ago has not yet come out because these things are not put in public domain for some or the other reason. Now, today I intend to request Dhananjay Ji Gokhale to talk about the process of audit in general, then internal audit, concurrent audit, followed by statutory audit. He is not going to talk about the approval process of statutory audit or the appointment of statutory audit because that's a different process and we have touched upon that separately. So, Dhananjay ji, welcome on the channel or welcome on the show. All the urban cooperative bankers are eagerly always waiting for you to hear from you because whatever that you tell is virtually a gospel truth because you try to stick to the authenticity of your words and the correctness and accuracy. And that's where, as an auditor, you are a person who is chased after. So, Dhananjay ji, I would request you to give a 5 minutes brief about audit, the types of audit, and how the bank's management or the top management should look at all these functionalities. Floor is yours.
Yeah. So, thank you for inviting me to talk about audit, which is kind of a domain
Oh, it's a
expertise
pleasure.
of all the
It's a
chartered
pleasure.
accountant.
Yeah.
Yeah. And since you're talking about basically three types of audits, like internal audit, concurrent audit, and statutory audit with respect to banking entities, first I would like to just bifurcate between what is the scope of all these three functions, and then we'll come to the part about how they are kind of interrelated with each other in a way, and how the reliance may or may not be, kept on each other, in a different perspective. Now, broadly, if you talk about, just to begin with, internal audit, typically internal audit per se is supposed to be an internal process of the bank, in the sense there are no external agencies which are involved. So, just to take an example of a UCB, a typical UCB, each UCB has an audit department and it is supposed to be equipped with the adequate manpower, which is having a required skill set in terms of not only credit or not only related to operation, but also related to systems and other allied areas also, including treasury and other technical areas. What typically is observed in most of the cooperative banks is that the audit department becomes a kind of a parking department, which ideally is supposed to be avoided. In the sense, the person who is posted in audit department is supposed to be well versed with everything. I mean, just to give an example,
But
if you
This,
talk
this, this
about
is
any
something what
audit,
happens in the
yeah,
entire industry. Why talk of cooperative bank? This happens in commercial banks
yeah,
as well.
yeah, yeah. Now, what we always expect from any audit function, whether it is internal or external, is that the person who is working in audit function is supposed to supervise, or not exactly supervise, but supposed to critically evaluate that what all has been carried out as a routine thing by the operations department or operational areas. Now, when we say that, what is expected is that if I want to cross-check any transaction or any act, I should say, I need to be a step ahead as compared to the person who is undertaking that particular kind of activity. So that's why I said that it should never be a parking department, but it should be a department wherein a selected person should be chosen who are well versed with various activities or various types of banking activities, and then only the
In
audit
fact, the
function
best
can
of
be
person
really
should be
fruitful.
placed there. Best of the person should be
Yeah.
placed there. Yeah.
Yeah, means my personal suggestion for that is that if bank adopts a kind of a strategy wherein maybe at a particular level, if one wants to get promoted, he needs to complete certain years in audit so that he is well versed with almost all audit
Very true.
related
Very true.
functions,
Very true. Yeah.
and also all departments and each and every activity is indirectly covered by that person. Now, having said that, the main focus or function of internal audit department in typically in UCB is that they have two kinds of job which are required to be carried out. One is about the inspection, and another is typically a snap audit which is conducted. Now, there is a big difference between these two approaches. As far as snap audit is concerned, typically it is supposed to be not exceeding 1 or 2 days, wherein major areas will be covered by that auditor, that is the internal auditor. And since we are talking on backdrop of certain unwarranted things which really happened in UCB, one of the major area or one of the critical area, I should say, in snap audit is that there is a surprise element which is always involved. The branch where the snap audit is carried out is never aware that from tomorrow the snap audit is going to happen. So usually what is done is that the person who are carrying out snap audit, they will simply go to the branch before opening of the branch, that is before the opening hours of the branch. First thing they will do is that they will verify the cash, and then the other things will be followed after that. Now, because of that surprise element, few things are naturally avoided, because when you become predictable, then it's a kind of a dilution of that audit function in certain instances. So that is first thing. Secondly, in stamp audit, only major areas are covered, and the areas wherein substantial volumes are there, those are typically covered in internal audit. That is a routine audit process. In most of the banks in internal audit, they ensure that they cover the entire advances portfolio in one way or the other. There are certain banks wherein sample checking is done. So it's either of the approach. Now, what is important is that when an internal audit personnel is looking after that audit of advances or other areas, it's more from banker's perspective rather than a chartered accountant or an external agency's perspective. So that's where the difference lies between an externally outsourced concurrent audit function and an internal audit function. Another thing is that this inspection is not supposed to be outsourced by any of the banks. So it is essentially required to be internally done, and no outsourcing is expected in internal audit function. As compared to that, if we talk about the concurrent audit, there is a scope of internal as well as concurrent audit, which is well defined in RBI's Master Circular. So one has to refer to that. It gives an overall guideline. It's not something which is having an exhaustive guideline, but it is a bare minimum thing which one has to cover when we talk about internal as well as concurrent audit. Now, as far as concurrent audit is concerned, there is an option available with the bank either to do it internally or to do it, with the help of external agencies, that is external practicing chartered accountant. The choice lies
Can
with
be
the bank.
done by a retired banker as well. Need not necessarily be a chartered accountant. What's your view? Because there are several seasoned bankers who are doing audit in various banks, the smallest banks especially.
Yeah, I will give you a basic difference in that. First thing is that as far as attestation function is concerned, only
That
chartered
the banker
accountants are
cannot do.
able to do that. That is the first thing. Second thing is that if the bankers wants to, or the rather the banks wants to have a flavor of external agencies, wherein they have a background of variety of banks, They have a background of professionalism as far as accounting standards and standards on auditing are concerned, because all CAs are bound by standards which are issued by CA Institute. So there is a kind of a different kind of a uniformity is there. There is a different kind of accountability is there, which may not be achieved. I'm not commenting about the quality of audit per se, but it's more of a kind of a reliance, which one has. Means just to give a kind of a comparison, if you purchase any product which has a BSI mark, it doesn't mean that the product which doesn't have BSI mark doesn't have that quality. But we have certain benchmarks, so that's why it's preferable that a chartered accountant does that. Another
Agreed.
important factor is that when you are looking at concurrent audit, from the auditing perspective point of view, the formal, audit related, I should say, professional education or qualification may or may not really exist in case of bankers. So it can be a kind of a combination wherein certain things can be definitely done by the bankers, but there are certain areas wherein chartered accountant might be preferred. Of course, it is left to the judgment and discretion of the bank. But what I recall, vaguely is that as far as this function is concerned, the RBI circular talks about chartered accountant, and the practice is very much there in banks wherein ex-banker might be taken as an officer on special duty. He might be getting posted in audit department. So in a way, it's not an outsourced thing. It becomes a kind of an in-house thing then, because you're taking him on board and there is no external thing. One more very vital thing which one has to remember is that if you're carrying out any function internally, you need to ask yourself as a banker one question, that whether the function can be really independent or not. Because when you are, roping in an external agency like a chartered accountant, there is an independence which is automatically roped in. So that is another way to, look at it. Now, as far as scope is concerned, the concurrent audit related part typically is supposed to cover the entire area of advances which are sanctioned during the period, which includes the renewals, TODs, and everything. KYC is something wherein 100% checking is required. So advances, that is the credit part, as well as KYC part, is something wherein there is no test check which is supposed to be there in concurrent audit. So that is first and foremost thing. Secondly, as far as other operational areas are concerned, naturally there will be a test checking which will be done, and the scope of concurrent audit is something wherein the bank has to give more stress upon, because RBI guidelines are minimal guidelines. They are not exhaustive one. So every bank has to ensure that they have their own flavor which is inducted in the concurrent audit scope. The scope is well defined. The scope has to be exhaustive. Exhaustive not in terms of number of pages, but in terms of the functions which are carried out at the branch level. So it should not leave out any of the areas which are covered by the branch. Now, once we have these concurrent as well as internal audit functions in place, another important factor is that what should be the coverage of concurrent audit, because that is also well defined in RBI circular. So one has to ensure that that is adhered to. Some banks do a kind of a combination wherein major branches are covered under monthly concurrent audit, and comparatively minor branches or comparatively smaller branches, I should say, they are covered under quarterly audit. So again, that is kind of a discretion which is available with the bank. So one has to ensure that they are within the ambit of the coverage which is expected from RBI's perspective. Now let's come at the statutory audit point of view, because
No, no,
that is the most
before that,
significant. Yeah,
there is one small question.
yeah,
Now, if there is a concurrent audit or an internal audit, which has been the practice,
yeah.
then don't you think that the statutory audit also does the same thing which the concurrent auditors are doing, and there is overlapping or there is repetitive nature of work? So how can you define the assignment of statutory auditor and that of a concurrent auditor? I understand legally it has a different connotation because the laws prescribe the respective state cooperative law as well as the multi-state law prescribe, plus Reserve Bank of India prescribes that your balance sheet and financial statements are required to be certified by a statutory auditor appointed
Hmm.
under the particular section, Section 85 or whatever that section is. But then that overlapping, can we think something on the overlapping of matters, or can the statutory auditors take a position कि भाई इस ब्रांच का कॉन्करेंट ऑडिट हो गया है तो मुझे कुछ ऑडिट करने की जरूरत नहीं है, तो उसका काम कम हो जाएगा ना?
Yeah, there is definitely certain kind of overlapping which will happen. Like for example, if someone is checking a loan file, naturally there is a overlapping because the approach will be always same. But at the same time, one has to keep in mind that as far as concurrent audit is concerned, it is always a function which is kind of a reporting to the management of the bank. As far as statutory auditor is concerned, their role is altogether different. They are not reporting to management of the bank, except in case of LFAR, which is naturally addressed to the management of the bank. But their main function is to give an opinion about whether the financial statements are expressing a true and fair view or not. So their focus is altogether different. Me just to give a example. If we talk about deliverables of both these functions, for concurrent audit, the deliverable is the monthly or quarterly concurrent audit report. That is a deliverable, from his side. If you talk about statutory audit, there are basically three kinds of deliverables. One is the independent auditor's report, which is addressed to the shareholders. And there, what is delivered is that the auditor is required to express an opinion as to whether the financial statements are giving a true and fair view or not. So that is what first deliverable. Second deliverable is in the form of LFAR, that is long form audit report, which is addressed to the management. It is more from the point of view of improvisation of internal, control system and other things. Not exactly internal control system, but there is an exhaustive kind of a checklist which is prescribed by Reserve Bank of India. So the auditor has to answer each and every question and give elaborate comments on that. Third deliverable is certifications. So there are multiple certifications which are involved, which every year the regulator defines and it gets conveyed to the auditor, wherein the auditor is required to give a certificate. Now, as far as concurrent auditor is concerned, there is no such requirement to issue any certification or anything else. Now, another basic difference is that even though now internal audit, that is a concurrent audit, is also attestation function, there is a basic difference is that concurrent auditor cannot certify financial statements of a bank. He cannot express an opinion about financial statement. Now, there is a practice which is very common amongst most of the UCBs that at the year end, they ask the concurrent auditor to certify the financial statements of that branch. Now, first
It's
thing is
trial
that,
balance.
firstly, trial balance. So that's a trial balance and not the financial statement. That is first thing.
Yeah.
Second thing is that concurrent auditor cannot certify or express an opinion on that. At the most, what he can do is that he can
He,
do a kind of
correct me
a,
if I'm wrong. He only
yeah,
confirms the accuracy of numbers, nothing beyond that. For example, if you got,
he,
say, hundreds of branches,
yeah,
दी कॉन्करेंट ऑडिटर या फिर ये तुम्हारा स्टैट्यूटरी ऑडिटर बंदा जो होगा वो हर जगह जाके एनपीए कैसे आइडेंटिफाई करेगा, सर्टिफाई करेगा? तो ही विल ऑलवेज फॉल बैक ऑन दैट कॉन्करेंट ऑडिटर की भाई तू सर्टिफाई कर दे, मैं कंसल्टेशन कर लेता हूँ एंड देन आई इशू अ
yeah.
कंसोलिडेटेड सर्टिफिकेट.
See, that is something which is
Practically this is
categorically
what is happening,
prohibited.
so I would like you to
No, no,
tell us.
no, it is not so. And it is not happening in that way because auditing standards are very clear. I cannot place I can refer to the concurrent audit reports, but I cannot place a reliance on concurrent audit report. I will just bifurcate that into two parts. Let's presume a place wherein there are branch statutory auditors which are appointed. And let's compare that with a concurrent auditor. So as far as branch statutory auditors are concerned, they have a equal status as far as statutory audit function is concerned. But if you talk about a concurrent auditor, it's an internal audit function. So it's not a statutory audit function. Now,
You
as a
see,
statutory auditor,
this is typically happening with the commercial banks. For the urban cooperative banks, statutory auditors branch को अपॉइंट करना ये बात ही नहीं है सर.
no,
स्टैट्यूटरी ऑडिटर
there is
पूरे
an
बैंक को
option.
करते हैं और वो पूरे बैंक का देखता
No,
है
no,
ना.
that is the option which is opted by the banks. There is no prohibition that why cooperative bank cannot appoint as branch statutory auditor. There is no
दैट इज
prohibition.
फाइन, दैट आई अंडरस्टूड. इसका
So,
मतलब ये
so
है कि
once,
यू शुड
yeah,
आस्क स्टैट्यूटरी ऑडिटर टू गो फॉर सर्टिफिकेशन फॉर ईच ऑफ द ब्रांच और ही शुड टेक ओनरशिप ऑफ दैट. हाउ इज दैट?
yeah. See, the ownership and I should say roles and responsibilities, everything that can never be diluted. He cannot say that he has he has delegated the powers of statutory audit to a concurrent auditor. That is not the case. Second important thing is that as far as reliance on branch auditor is concerned, that is covered under SA 600. That is Standards on Auditing 600, which doesn't apply to concurrent auditor. So as far as concurrent audit is concerned, what a statutory auditor can do at the most is that he can refer that report. But in his main audit report, he cannot say that he has relied on those reports. So if
ओके.
you look at typically a public sector bank statutory audit report, you will find a typical comment in the opinion para itself that the central auditor will say that we have audited, say, top 20 branches. There may be another 5,000 branches are audited by branch statutory auditors. And maybe there are, additional 4,000 branches which are unaudited. So now all these unaudited branches might be having a concurrent audit, but that will never, that will never be having any place in statutory audit report for the simple reason, because my responsibility as a statutory auditor can never get diluted just because concurrent auditor has performed his concurrent audit. He cannot do a attestation function. So he cannot attest the
Okay.
trial balance or financial statements per se. So that is a basic difference. So I will always refer to the report, but I cannot absolve from my responsibility as a statutory auditor. So my responsibility is never diluted. As compared to
Okay.
SA 600, which talks about the audit wherein branch audit function is there, wherein my responsibility will not be there with respect to the branches which are covered under statutory branch audit. Now, of course, SA 600, there are different, things which are there in use. So let's not get into that
सर,
because it
अर्बन
is also
कोऑपरेटिव
subject to review
बैंकों
now.
को ये एस 600 का कुछ मालूम नहीं है सर, कुछ ज्यादा। आई मीन दे डोंट रियली लुक
Yeah,
इनटू
yeah,
दैट।
yeah, yeah, yeah. Now, as far as statutory auditor is concerned, what he is expressing is an opinion, again, just to reiterate. So that is the basic difference between a concurrent auditor and a statutory auditor.
ओके। नाउ ये जो स्टैट्यूटरी ऑडिट के बंदे काम करते हैं, दे वर्चुअली, एज यू राइटली सेड, देयर कुड बी सम ओवरलैपिंग एंड ऑल दैट, इट्स ऑल फाइन।
Yeah, yeah,
They really come out with one statutory auditor's report which is submitted to the members.
yeah,
Now, when it is submitted to the members, they qualify or disqualify or whatever that you call it. When if there are certain things which are not as per the standards or the requirements of the law, or non-compliance to any accounting standard, they make a mention of that.
yeah,
Along with that, there is this concept of LFAR. Now, the banks are finding it difficult. ये LFAR responsibility किसका है? ऑडिटर का है कि बैंक वाले का है? So LFAR, who
yeah,
has to give LFAR? Whether the statutory auditor has to go get the data, get the details, and give the complete report. So LFAR is principally a responsibility of the statutory auditor. Banks
yeah,
help the statutory auditors by giving up the data, and the statutory auditors depend on the banks कि भाई ये information आया है, सही है, ठीक है।
yeah,
लेकिन उसके बारे में हमेशा कंफ्यूजन रहता है कि भाई एलएफएआर किसने भरना है। दिस इज वन पार्ट। Second thing which I would like you to focus for us is that what is a qualified report? Now, what
yeah,
happens? Auditors will give hundreds of pages of comments on several accounts.
yeah,
End of the day, what you print is the 2 or 3 page report that the auditor given, which
yeah,
becomes a part of your
right,
annual report rather.
right, yeah,
So, how the banker has to look at this particular report?
yeah. So first, let me talk about LFR quickly because that is a comparatively shorter kind of a thing, and then we'll come to the modified report. What is called technically is a modified report. So as far as LFR is concerned, LFR is having a set question here actually, wherein for against each question there are two parts of LFR. One part is about the head office related function. Second one is related to the branch function. Now, as far as the UCB's LFAR is concerned, that has not undergone any revision since last multiple years actually, as compared to commercial banks, wherein LFAR got revised in 2020, September 2020 to be very precise. Now, leaving that aside, about the revision, what is expected is that LFAR firstly is issued by the auditor, but at the same time, the data which is required for LFAR is required to be given by the bank, which will be verified by the auditors. There are annexes to LFAR where in large, borrower accounts, there are certain basic data or financial data compilation is there. So that annexure has to be essentially prepared by the branch. That is not branch, I should say, that is prepared by the bank. And that should be given to the auditor, which is not certified by the auditor per se, but it is more kind of a compilation of data which the bank gives to the auditor, based on which he verifies, those that credit portfolio. So the basic reason why that annexure to LFAR is there is it's a basic compilation which the bank should keep ready. So their auditor doesn't play any role. That is not certified by the auditor also. It's more of a compilation which the banker will give to the auditor. Now, as far as audit opinion or audit report is concerned, what we generally see is a clean report, and that clean report typically starts with the paragraph heading of opinion. And then the second paragraph heading is basis of opinion. Now, in the first paragraph, actually, yeah,
Just please also clarify. the difference between true and correct and true and fair.
Yeah, sure, sure. I was about to
Yeah.
do that. So as
Okay.
far as opinion paragraph is concerned, the opinion which auditor is expressing is on the financial statements. Now, what comprises a financial statement typically? Let's first understand that. It typically comprises, on a broader basis, four parts. First one is balance sheet. Second one is profit and loss account. Third one is cash flow statement. And fourth one is notes on accounts, which will also include accounting policies. Now, auditor is required to give an opinion as to whether this financial statement gives a true and fair view or not. Now, what is true and fair and what is how it differs from true and correct? As far as true and correct is concerned, it means that there is 100% accuracy. It's absolute assurance which auditor is going to give, which is prohibited as far as the auditing standards are concerned. So no one can give a true and correct kind of opinion. That is not the thing which auditor is supposed to give. So what is given is true and fair. Now, what is the exact difference? True and fair means there is no material misstatement which is there in the financial statement. So both words are very important. First one is that ideally there should not be any misstatement. That is the ideal thing. But it should not be material. Even if there is a misstatement of maybe few thousand rupees or few rupees, it's fine. It's not material. So the materiality standards are also required to be set by the auditors based on the type of bank, based on volume or value of the bank which is auditing. And of course, it will differ from bank to bank. There is no exact definition as to what is materiality. Now, I will give a simple example. So let's presume that we have, say, 10 lakh rupees of error which is there. So bank which is, bank like say State Bank of India, which is massive in size, 10 lakh rupees may not be material. It may not come in that fraction also. But let's take a bank, which is comparatively a small bank, maybe a single unit bank, 10 lakhs will become material. So there the materiality standard might be 10,000 only. Now, even if 10,000 is a materiality standard, maybe for a very small bank, but suppose they have a profit of only 8,000 rupees. Now, if I booked excessive income of 10,000, it is a material thing because if I rectify that, my profits will turn into losses. So the auditor has to pay attention to that. Now, having said that, when an auditor is expressing an opinion about whether it is true and fair or not, if he feels that there is a material misstatement, there are three ways to qualify a report or modify a report. By technical terms, it is called as a modified report. There are three gradations in that. So suppose the auditor is of the opinion that in only one of the items of balance sheet or P&L account, there is aberration. So let's presume that, say, IDR on investment is not provided to the extent of, say, 50 lakhs. But otherwise, P&L and everything is fine. So he will require to modify his opinion, and instead of opinion, he will have a qualified opinion. Now, the typically wordings of qualified opinion will be, it will give a true and fair view subject to. So subject to will be this qualification. That there is a shortfall of depreciation provision which is made. Now let's presume that there are multiple errors are there. So the errors are pervasive in nature. So across P&L balance sheet there are errors. So what the auditor will do is auditor will give a adverse opinion, and the wording will be does not disclose true and fair view. So your opinion para accordingly has to change the title. So if I'm giving a qualified opinion, my opinion para will be qualified opinion. Second para will be basis for qualified opinion. If I am issuing an adverse opinion, my opinion para will have a heading as adverse opinion and then basis for adverse opinion. Now there is a third level also. It's a disclaimer of opinion. So let's presume that the bank has prevented the auditor from collecting the required sufficient and appropriate evidence for his audit function. Maybe few files are not given, valuation reports are not provided, cash counting is not the access to cash counting is not given. Whatever it is, it's a restriction which is imposed. So what the auditor will say is, I will give a disclaimer of opinion. So he will say that I am not able to express any opinion. I don't know whether it is true and fair or whether it is there or not. So it's a disclaimer, which is the highest level of modified opinion. And the important factor is that the first para will talk about how the auditor is expressing an opinion. So if it is opinion, you can be 100% sure that it's a clean report. If it is a qualified opinion, first level actually, first degree. If it is adverse opinion, it is a second degree. Disclaimer of opinion is something which should never happen. And naturally, second para will be basis for opinion. So it's basis for qualified opinion, basis for adverse opinion. Now, in addition to that, there is one more thing, which is emphasis of matter paragraph. Now, what is this emphasis of matter paragraph? It is not qualification or adverse opinion. Auditors wants the reader to read the audit report along with something which is given in notes on accounts, some vital points, maybe some new entry which RBI had suggested. For example, like for PMC exposure, there was a staggering over the 5 years which was done. So which is unusual. There is a regulatory relief which is given, which is not exactly as per the accounting standard. But since there is a regulatory relief, auditor will not qualify the his opinion, but he will want the reader to invite an attention. Now, when you invite an attention, it means that you are asking that reader to read that particular line or notes on accounts. Now, let's presume that the bank says that I will not write that in notes on accounts. I don't want it. Then the option or remedy with the auditor is that he can have other matter paragraph wherein he can express all those things. Because notes on account belong to the bank. Auditor will not draft it. So if the bank denies that, he will have other matter paragraph. So auditor, when you read the audit report, you need to carefully read that. You need to understand what the auditor is exactly going to convey. Let me just add one last point about true and fair and how it is very, kind of a subjective. I will take a simple example. Let's presume that there are two frauds which have happened in a particular bank. Value is say 10 crores. One fraud is reported, other fraud is not reported. What regulatory guidelines say is if you report the fraud, you can stagger it over 4 quarters. So let's presume in the last quarter, the fraud has occurred. So the reported fraud will have a hit on your profit and loss account only to the extent of 2.5 crores. The fraud which is not reported, it will have a hit of 10 crores. Now, what does that mean actually? The moment you report a fraud, your hit on P&L account is staggered. Now, you need to ask a question to yourself whether it is really true and fair or not. But since there is a regulatory relief, it is presumed to be having a true and fair view. But still, I just thought that to give a thought for thinking.
No, it's
So,
just fantastic,
yeah,
fantastic clarity on the subject.
yeah,
There are a couple of other things which, in fact, I intend that you should talk on those things.
yeah,
Uh, the small in 3 or 4 minutes, there is one area which, if you can focus and just repeat, there has been a
yeah,
lot of confusion in the sector about the technical write-off and prudential write-off. If you can
yeah,
talk in 3 or 4 minutes about that, because I don't
yeah,
think the subject is something where we can spend 30 minutes on discussing that.
yeah,
What
yeah.
bank should be doing on technical write-off and prudential write-off, or what could be the process? And we'll conclude the day's deliberations.
I will quickly tell a difference between an actual write-off and technical or prudential write-off. My personal view is that there is no difference between a technical or prudential write-off for the simple reason that in technical or prudential write-off, bank never forgoes right to recover the amount. So that remains intact. That is first thing. Second thing is that the borrower is never aware about whether his account is prudentially or technically written off or not. That is the second thing. Third thing is that as far as the CIBIL records are concerned, CIBIL records are not affected irrespective of whether the bank prudentially or technically writes off that account. Now just let's compare that with actual write-off. Actual write-off is nothing but a compromise settlement scheme or a one-time settlement scheme. Wherein that amount which is written off, that is forgone by the bank forever. They lose the right of recovery. So they issue a no dues letter to that particular borrower. So that is never recoverable. So that is a basic difference between an actual write-off and a prudential or a technical write-off. Now, why the bank will go for a prudential or technical write-off? That is more interesting. The bank goes for that is that without losing the right of recovery, the bank can take income tax benefit of writing off that account. So the account is taken out of your balance sheet. Balance sheet is cleaned. You get the income tax benefit. And second thing is that it probably might improvise your gross NPA ratio. Why I'm saying probably is that it depends upon the actual numbers. It will reduce your gross NPAs, but ratio wise, again, it depends, how you are writing it off. So again, just to reiterate in one line, actual write-off, you forget the right of, forgo the right of recovery. CIBIL will specify that it's one-time settlement or a compromise settlement. Borrower is aware that his account is written off. As compared to that, in technical write-off, borrower doesn't know. CIBIL is not affected. Right to recovery remains intact. Now, only common point in all these cases, which prudentially bank has to follow, is that they should ideally exhaust all remedial measures and they should document it. It shouldn't happen that, account is NPA and I'm going to write it off technically and prudentially. That should not be the, case.
I
So that's
believe that that they should exhaust all the measures is not being made applicable to urban cooperative banks. It is only for commercial banks. For urban
I'm saying
cooperative
about
banks, the
prudentiality.
technical prudential write-off, they are not saying that
No, no, no. I'm
you
saying
should
no, no.
exhaust
I'm
all the
saying
remedies because you are continuing with the right of recovery. No,
no, no.
so
What I'm
exhaustion
saying
of
is
remedy does not arise.
no, no. That is right.
Exhaustion
I'm
of
saying
all
that
remedy does not arise in prudential or
no,
technical
I
write-off.
agree. I agree. No, no. What I wanted to suggest was prudentially the bank should have it documented that they have done efforts, all based efforts to recover that account. See, otherwise, what will happen is that
Why?
even if the account is
Hello.
substandard,
Why in prudential write-off they should substantiate the efforts?
no, because otherwise, once the account is
No, nothing
substandard, you
has
can
been
simply write it
suggested
off.
in the RBI instruction, sir. Maybe we can have a detailed deliberation on that.
Yeah, yeah, sure.
We may not agree as of now
Yeah,
because I'm also falling back on certain things which are I'm not
yeah,
absolutely
we agree to
confident.
disagree.
We may agree to disagree. We will talk on the subject once again when we invite Dhananjay Gokhale.
Sure.
We will be talking on series of subjects about the accounting policies, the as I stated last Sunday about the internal accounts and the actions to be taken or the care that has to be taken by the management, how audit committee should focus on all these various aspects and what should be the role of board, all these series of activities we are going to do. You simply have to wait from Sunday to Sunday.